Hey, I'm Tim, and welcome to the Mr. Maple Show.
Today we're doing a Saturday showcase. We're back with the Makawa family, part 4. I'm Matt. I think you're going to like this one. We've got a huge collection of Makawa yatsabusa.
Now, these are all selections from Makawa yatsabusa, or very similar traits to Makawa yatsabusa. If you haven't already, check out our part 1, part 2, and our part 3 of Makawa yatsabusa.
Yeah, these are some highlight trees. We're coming back with 5 more interesting forms in that Makawa yatsabusa family. Now, if you hadn't watched those other videos yet, we kind of coined the phrase here a little bit at our nursery, Makawa yatsabusa family. We want to think about some of these trees kind of in that category of like the Ghost series. So I like to lump them together. These are trees that continue on that Makawa yatsabusa trait and expand that lineage and expand what you can have in one of our most popular Japanese maples.
You know, in Matt's garden, he actually created almost like the Makawa yatsabusa family tree. You've got a ton of these plants all over your garden.
Yeah.
This is one of our favorite varieties of Japanese maples. When Jen Putnam came and visited our nursery, he asked me what my favorite Japanese maple was.
We had the good cop-out answer.
And we had to say Makawa yatsabusa and all of its progeny, which includes all these plants in the Makawa yatsabusa family. There's so many cool plants. We love Makawa yatsabusa because of that tightly layering habit, that dwarf compact shape. I mean, the way these plants have a unique texture in the landscape, they're hardy, they're easy to grow, and they typically give a pretty good fall color.
So some really cool ones here. We'll get into it with Acer palmatum, and this is a mouthful, Mankawa yatsabusa. So this was an introduction by our friend Keith Johansson. Now, Keith Johansson's famous for truncatums. Let us know if you'd like to see an entire series on Acer truncatum. We could do it here at our nursery. But Keith's famous for those Acer truncatums. He was the original owner of MrMaples. He sold that to our good friend Scott Hubble. And Keith not only has an eye for crazy truncatums that do well, but he also has an eye for Japanese maples. Now, this was a selection that Keith made, and his claim is that he open air pollinated Acer palmatum Makawa yatsabusa with Acer shirasawanum moonrise.
Now, could this be a shirasawanum hybrid with a palmatum?
I don't know. I think he got lucky and found the best genetic traits similar to that because he went through enough seeds. But he claims to have open air pollinated the two, and maybe it worked out because this one certainly has some of those unique traits from moonrise.
Now, Carl Munn is his good friend who introduced moonrise, and that's where the Munn comes from in Mankawa yatsabusa.
Right.
It's like Makawa yatsabusa, but with Carl Munn's name in there. Now, it really has some of those orange colors like a shirasawanum moonrise.
I've seen yellower older growth with apricot new growth on this, which is what you think of with moonrise in a more Makawa, well, exactly a Makawa yatsabusa style shape.
Now, it's an amazing plant, tightly growing plant, just like Makawa yatsabusa, but some really great colors across this plant. And many of these plants, you're probably like, I've never heard of this.
Right.
We've got a ton of Makawa yatsabusas.
We go through a lot of them. All these won't necessarily make it into cultivar status. I think everything we've talked about so far has. And I actually love Mankawa yatsabusa so much. It's a crazy name, I know. But I would put it up there in that category with Mayday.
Mystic Makawa.
Mystic Makawa, with Japanese Princess, with Koi, and Red Panda. I think Mankawa yatsabusa has a place in that top tier of new color Makawa yatsabusa forms.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's a really cool plant. Gives a lot of good color in the early spring. It does go to green midsummer like a lot of the Makawa yatsabusa types. But the spring interest on Mankawa yatsabusa is pretty spectacular.
So far for me, my stock plants have been a little shorter and a little wider growing. Now, it may be that I haven't had, a ton of them in the ground yet to show the shapes. We've been grafting as many of this one as we can possible here at our nursery. I've loved the colors. I find just like with Mystic Makawa, you'll get your best color on Mankawa yatsabusa if you give it some early morning sun. That early morning sun in the ground tends to really make the colors the most premium.
And a lot of these color spring interest Makawa yatsabusas, if you give them some protection from the hot afternoon sun, you're going to retain that color longer throughout the season. But if you give it more sunlight, you may get a more bold color on it.
Yeah.
And so it's a trade-off. And
yeah, Keith actually had several different Makawa yatsabusa seedlings that he had looked through and evaluated, and he had some names on some different ones. This was my favorite of the group, though. I think this was the star. I've looked at some of those, I've compared some of the other ones, and there may be some that beat out some of those, but this one's hard to beat.
And is it a shirasawanum hybrid, or is it that he selected traits for what he was looking for in a
Right.
Shirasanum hybrid.
Well, he certainly hit it out the park either way.
Yeah.
I can't argue with the man that he open air pollinated it, because it certainly has some really cool traits that remind me a lot of Moonrise.
Yeah. And then next up, we've got Acer palmatum Makawa kaen. Now, kaen is Japanese for gold.
Okay. This one's an interesting one in that it does have some golden hues, but it's also one of the darkest foliage bronze colors.
Yeah, and so this is a bronze like Makawa. I mean, it has those tightly layering habit. It's a selection by Crispin Silva. So this is his companion plant with Mystic Makawa of a bronze-colored Makawa yatsabusa.
Yeah, I've liked this one so far. We've been growing it. We were one of the first nurseries to offer it here at our nursery, and big fan of it. I mean, it's been really interesting so far. I like the growth rate of it. It seemed to be a really good growth rate. It hadn't been, you know, a wimp. It's got out there. It's kind of filled out. It's made a nice plant for us. Beautiful color patterns to it as well. I've had more orangey color in the fall on this one typically, which is nice as well.
Yeah, definitely a cool one. The great thing about Makawa yatsabusas is they do great in containers. Makawa yatsabusa family variants. They do great in containers, great in small places in the garden. They do great in conifer beds.
Yeah.
And they give a unique texture that really stands out from many of the other varieties of Japanese maples.
Right.
I mean, there is a lot of different varieties of weeping lace leaves. Why can't there be amazing a number
Makawa category
of Makawa
instead of
yatsabusa
lace
types?
leaves? We'll just say the Makawa family, and that's going to cover that whole category.
Yeah, exactly.
So next up here on the table, we have a pretty rare one and one of the most dwarf of the whole Makawa family. We have Acer palmatum Tom Thumb.
Yeah, love what this thing does. It's a super slow growing Makawa yatsabusa variant.
It may be even smaller than Tattoo.
Yeah, it's probably one of the slowest growing Makawa yatsabusa variants.
Great for production. we're gonna corner the market on this plant.
Yeah, really cool plant. It has a little more rounded leaf than something like a Tattoo, but it still has those serrated edges. And so that's a great plant to compare it to. But one of the slowest growing Makawa yatsabusa types. We don't offer it that often on Mr. Maple.
It takes a long time to get some soundwood ready for this one to be in production because of that small habit. We have a really nice one in the display garden there at my parents' home, and it's probably, gosh, at least 15 years old, and it's no more than about 2 by 2.
I know you're looking here and you see this 1 gallon. You're like, man, that's a really good size 1 gallon. Well, this is probably about a 4 to 5 year 1 gallon. So it's an extremely old plant to be this size.
We first heard about this tree from one of our mentors who really has done a lot for us, Elizabeth Mundy. She was really instrumental in getting our nursery. When we were getting going, we would ask her questions and bug her and ask her questions all the time. And she was so generous with her time. Our original plant of Tom Thumb actually came from her.
Now, Tom Thumb, I don't know the exact history behind this plant.
Yeah.
If anyone knows the history behind that plant, I would love to know. I would assume that it has to do something with Tom Thumb Nursery, who introduced Picea orientalis Tom Thumb. But it could be just the name like Tattoo of a small character. Because this is such a small Makawa yatsabusa variant. If you know the history behind this plant, comment in the comment section. We'd love to find out. We love the history behind plants here at Mr. Maple. We love telling the stories behind the plants. And that's one that I definitely want to know the story behind.
Yeah,
it's a cool
great plant, and we've always loved it for its very, very compact shape. I mean, one of the most compact, slow-growing forms of a Makawa yatsabusa you could ever grow.
Yeah. So next up, we have Acer palmatum Catalina yatsabusa.
Oh, this is a cool one. Our good friend introduced this one. It is a variegated form of Makawa yatsabusa. This one tends to be a little bit more upright, so it tends to be a small vase-shaped upright tree. And I love that on a variegated Makawa yatsabusa. Hey, we're here in part 4, and we're still adding variegated Makawa yatsabusas. I can think of a few you might not even know about that could be in part 5, but we're still adding variegated Makawa yatsabusas. This one's very unique. I think Tim once said that kind of looked like Dr. Seuss, and that was a great analogy for how this foliage forms.
Yeah, the new growth flushes across this are very Dr. Seuss-esque. Love what this plant does with the variegation on a Makawa yatsabusa type. I would say the thing that's most comparable to this would be something like lily pad, but the shapes are completely different.
Oh, yeah.
The shape on lily pad typically grows wide and spreading, where this Catalina yatsabusa grows upright.
No arching. Like lily pad's low and very defined in its shape.
Even so, a little more so upright than typical Makawa yatsabusa.
I would say very much so. I wouldn't consider it columnar, but it's very much arching upward in its habit. And really nice variegation. This is a lime green on dark green. You know, it gets wider as the season goes on. It gets even a little bit more pronounced later into the summer. And really colorful plant here. I've really been impressed with its color. And not only that, its durability and its stability. It's been a great plant that has been very stable for a variegated Makawa.
Now, the unique thing about this too is we often get some yellows and oranges and reds on this plant all at the same time.
Right.
And so you get a really unusual fall color with Catalina yatsabusa rather than just being a pure orange to red like typical Makawa yatsabusa. You get some yellows infused with oranges and reds. And I think that's partly because it's variegated, and the variegation will often go to different colors on different parts of the leaf because each of those parts of the leaf are producing different pigments.
Oh, amazing color patterns on this one. It's been a winner for us here. It's one we're definitely going to keep producing a lot of at Mr. Maple. I'm a huge fan of it, and I think it's a great new introduction. It's one we're really upping production numbers on, and I've really been impressed with it so far. Every time I've compared it, it's looked excellent in the landscape. It's held its foliage really well into the season. It's performed well for me here in Zone 6B in full sun. I would say with any of the variegated Makawa types, late day shade in your high heat index areas.
Yeah.
Going to work zones 5 through 9, but if you're in a high heat index area, probably going to need to protect any of the variegated ones.
I would definitely agree. Awesome plant. Love the variegated Makawa yatsabusas. You get a Makawa yatsabusa plus variegation.
So last up here on the table, I've got one I know you haven't heard of because we hadn't released it yet.
I think Brian posted one photo on Facebook.
Okay, now
And it went viral.
Brian does create the hype machine. He turns out the hype. So if Brian Rule has it in his garden, you know it's good. This one is Acer palmatum Angel the Prince.
Yeah, Angel the Prince really has some nice purple kind of colors to it as it pushes new growth. I mean, I would say it's a little more Makawa-like and a little more flatter leaf, but it still curls a little bit. And it's almost like a more colorful Teroyama, but with a little more cupping to the leaf.
I would definitely throw it into that Teroyama style category for the Makawa family. I've been really impressed with it. I like it late summer. It's kind of gotten to a very almost emeraldy blue-green for me in shade, which is really nice. It's got a very unique color. It kind of bridges that gap between Makawa yatsabusa and Kuranajishi a little bit as well, in that it has that twisting foliage, but also that tightness. A nice upright small plant, typically 6 to 8 foot even in 10 years, so it's going to be a little slower growing than many of your uprights, but still keeping some of that density we like for that Makawa family. And we've been really impressed. You know, we're holding on to a little bit of foliage here late, but it's been a very, very bold red for us in its fall color.
And I love what this plant does out in the landscape. I mean, this is a plant that we've grown. We've seen some older specimens out in the landscape.
Right.
And this is a plant that stands out and is a plant that is very unique. You see it from a distance and you're like, what in the world is that? And then you see the colors this thing puts on in the spring. I think that's why Brian was freaking out about it.
I've been a huge fan of it. We're upping our production numbers on it here at Mr. Maple to get it out to you guys. I think it's going to be an excellent addition to that Makawa family and kind of pair with that Teroyama style of the Makawa family. It's in that category for sure of the grouping, but it still has that density and that uniqueness that makes you go, that looks like a Makawa yatsabusa.
And I know I keep saying this, but that new growth flush, it's simply amazing. That's the reason why the photos went viral. People were like, I've never heard of Angel the Prince. What in the world is this?
Another new one? Yeah, it's another new one. Now, I know many people that are watching this video that are Mr. Maple fans probably knew Makawa kaen and Catalina yatsabusa because we've had both those available pre this video shooting. You might not have seen Mankawa yatsabusa before, or Tom Thumb, or Angel the Prince, but all these are coming to Mr. Maple soon. Again, we do sell out of our Makawa types really quickly, and it takes a long time to get signwood on some of these. So be signed up for our 10 at 10s. You can also find these under the Makawa family on MrMaple.com. Many of these already have pages made, and you can sign up to get notified when they're back in stock.
Really appreciate y'all watching this video. Make sure to like, subscribe, share, comment, get involved in the live chat always. And as always, take care.
God bless.
And have an awesome day.